everyone, it's Lotus here. So, about 2 weeks ago, I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once. And when I tell you that this movie wrecked me, I mean that I had what I can only describe as an emotional reckoning and was left ugly crying in the theater by the third act. Why, you may be asking? How could a movie about a woman traveling through zany multiversal versions of herself have moved me to such an extent that I felt my very soul weeping about the machinations of my own existence? Well, in order to answer that, I'll have to give you a little context. First, I'll explain the film premise for those who aren't familiar, so some spoilers ahead. Everything Everywhere All at Once follows the story of Evelyn Wang. The movie begins with one of the most banal and unassuming scene openings as we find Evelyn poring over receipts for her taxes. She makes it pretty clear early on that she's primarily worried about how her father perceives her and her business, a humble laundromat. While sorting through paperwork, her husband Waymond helps her to prepare for the Chinese New Year celebration that they'll soon host at their business. Waymond carries with him some paperwork of his own, divorce papers, though he keeps them hidden from Evelyn for now, as he quickly realizes that this isn't an appropriate moment to spring such news on his already stressed wife. Joy, their daughter, struggles with the prospect of concealing the true nature of her relationship with her girlfriend from her grandfather. She wants to finally share who she is with him, but their mother insists that he wouldn't understand and it would only cause turmoil for their family. In fact, Evelyn insists that Joy is fortunate that she herself is so understanding of their relationship. Joy's girlfriend Becky is gently encouraging of her coming out, but seems eager for Joy to do so, if only for Joy's sake. When Evelyn's father enters the laundromat, Evelyn stutteringly introduces Becky as Joy's friend to him, a move which frustrates Joy. The family hands out invitations to their Chinese New Year celebration to a few of their regular customers, and then set out to take their tax paperwork to the IRS office for an audit. It is here that we meet Deirdre Beardra, the most no-nonsense of all tax auditors. A career choice already thoroughly devoid of nonsense, and it is here that reality begins to unfurl for Evelyn. The audit isn't going well as Deirdre uses her marker to circle what she perceives as a superfluous expense in bold black ink. As Waymond tries to reason with the auditor, Deirdre gestures to her many awards, each of which are shaped like certain plugs of a very specific variety. She explains that she received said awards for her ability to weed out the BS. As the audit goes further south, Evelyn receives the message from another Waymond to meet her in the nearby supply closet. Multiversal mayhem ensues from here, as he informs her that she's the only Evelyn who can stop the many universes from being destroyed by Jobu Tupaki, the omnipotent alternate version of their daughter Joy. Evidently, Jobu Tupaki has been looking for this specific variant of Evelyn. This is due to the fact that in the logic of the film, people are able to draw skills from alternate versions of themselves. Because of this, the Evelyn that we meet holds limitless potential due to her living the worst version of her life. She's jaded and cynical, her business is failing, she never seemed to pursue any of her interests, her daughter is becoming more estranged, and her father is perpetually disappointed in her, not to mention that her husband is filing for divorce. And so, the alternate version of her husband, Waymond, must help her to learn to unlock her potential, powered by unfulfilled dreams, to stop the imminent erasure of the multiverse at the hands of Jobu Tupaki. Now that I've caught you all up on the plot of the film, it's time I dig into why it shook me to my core. This is going to require that I get more personal than I usually do on this channel, so please bear with me. Like many YouTubers, I always had a hard time feeling normal growing up or accepted in life by my peers. By about third grade, my parents took me out of private school to homeschool me for about the rest of my scholastic career. I've always been really sensitive, but this sheltering only further cemented that trait during my formative years. Despite being constantly verbally abused by my brother 6 years my senior, I never became mean, harsh, or rude. I had anger for a while, definitely, but at my core, maybe out of spite, I made the decision never to be cruel. The thought of hurting someone else's feelings still fills me with utter dread, even if they may have deserved some form of comeuppance. I'm sure a lot of people feel this way. Being kind, optimistic, and even silly had become my way of fighting back against the bitterness of the world, determined to drag me down with it. I've had plenty of strangers ask me why I'm so happy, some of them annoyed. I'm not trying to come off obnoxious or forced. I just naturally smile a lot. I am happy. Despite years of crippling depression, anxiety, and spending most of my life hating myself and how meek and sensitive I was, you can usually catch me smiling or singing. I give a lot of credit to my faith for this because at my lowest points, when I was ready to give up and just throw myself away, I felt God pulling me out in ways that were often too coincidental to explain away. And I believe that the Lord gave me this coping mechanism to not only survive to this point, but to eventually thrive in a way that I was meant to, in a way that feels right for me. The problem is, while I was still growing and learning this way of coping with the world, I was overly sensitive, meek, quiet, and terrified of just about everything and everyone. I was an anxious mess for most of my life. I really didn't even like myself. As I was learning to become truly kind and not just placating others to avoid conflict or even just being disliked, I was often needlessly wounded and doled out second and third chances far too readily. I didn't understand what my own boundaries were, let alone how to communicate them to others. And even if I had known how, I probably wouldn't have anyway. I was too desperate for acceptance and friendship. This was not helped by the fact that I am neurodivergent, something that I only found out about myself the past year or so. My husband, on the other hand, has never had this issue. He's always been more than capable of telling people off when they're crossing a line, even going so far as to point out their own fallacies in total deadpan. He's entirely unbothered by what others think of him, and I've always appreciated and admired that trait in him. Why am I telling you all this? Well, remember Waymond? Evelyn's husband in the movie? Well, it was his speech which really truly stuck a chord in me.
你觉得我很软弱是吗？多年前，我们刚开始谈恋爱的时候，你爸总是觉得我的心太软。也许当时他是对的。你说过，这是一个很残酷的世界，我们都在里面绕圈子。这我明白。你和我都在这个地球上活了这么久了，我总是看到事情好的一面。那不是因为我天真，而是必要，而需要。这也就是我的生存之道。我理解，但你不是一个服输的人，我又何尝不是？只是我们选择的处理方式不一样。
That wrecked me. I've never felt so seen before, so validated. Lately, I had been trying to practice standing up for myself and others in a way that was more coarse and direct, and I started viewing the world in a more cynical and combative way. I became resentful of it and how often I felt I had to defend myself. But here are the aspects of myself that I so often viewed as weak and vulnerable, traits that I still determined for whatever reason to hold fast to, even if it was to my own detriment, were described as strength. I've always wanted to be viewed as a warrior, but I always assumed I needed to be more like Xena, stoic and fearless, to truly become one. I figured I had the capacity to fight deep down inside of me, and characters like Sailor Moon made me feel like it was possible to be a warrior and still retain my sensitive nature, but I still felt that it was something that I had to learn to become. That maybe I could compromise by developing some sort of switch within me to fight sometimes and care others. However, Waymond's speech really resonated with me. Not only did it validate that I am a warrior despite appearing silly and unassuming and optimistic, but that I was lying to myself all this time by trying to be more like my husband. In taking his perfectly well-intended advice, I was internally splitting myself in two. I was becoming discordant, ununified. I was becoming an alternate version of myself. and it made me miserable. I couldn't suppress my sobs in the theater. I was a snotty mess by the time the credits rolled, and I immediately made a beeline for the ladies' room. It seemed like I was alone in there, so I didn't try quite so hard to suppress my cries, though the echoes were unnerving. I tried to pull myself together and wash my face. As I was drying my hands, a young woman no older than 21 peered around the corner to ask simply, "Can I give you a hug?" I said, "Sure," and she hugged me for a while. I'll always remember that kind gesture. And I feel that that was the Lord too, prompting her to hug a stranger who was clearly going through something. Not only was he telling me that I was going to be okay and that he was looking out for me, but I think he was reminding me that this is what kindness does. It is powerful. You watching this, if you're struggling with liking yourself and if you feel that you're too soft for this world and that you need to become harder or coarser in order to survive and thrive and fight, I hope you know that there is power in your kindness. There is strength in your optimism. So please be true to yourself. We need more kind people, not less. And we need to recognize that we are strong. We are fighters. This is how we fight.